Welcome back to this edition of Like Nobody's Business. I'm Mary Beth Seawald. While the special session is over, the 2021 legislature is just around the corner. It's not far off. While we continue our conversation with three of Nevada's top government affairs experts, Billy Vasiliadis of R&R Partners, Brian Wachter of the Nevada Retail Association, and Paul Moradkin of the Vegas Chamber. Gentlemen, thank you guys so much for coming back with us. We've got, like we just said, we've got the 21 session right around the corner. I want to ask each one of you, what do you think are the top issues that we're going to be looking at and facing in the 21 session? Billy, let's start with you.
Well, we're still going to be facing pandemic recovery, pandemic relief. In the best case, by the time they go back there, this virus is under control or being managed. But the devastation that it will have left behind will continue to plague the 21 session in terms of budget, in terms of funding issues, which will then lead to, I'm sure, some sort of revenue discussion that I think we'll all have to be involved in. I also think that one of the, in looking at the makeup of that legislature, and unless either of the other two disagree, I don't think it's going to dramatically change. May change by one or two, but not dramatically. Social justice will be very much on the agenda. It'll be, and I think a lot of time and attention will be given to it. So I would say those will be the two dominant issues of so the whole budget, revenue, pandemic recovery relief, and then number two, social justice.
Okay, Brian Wachter, what about you? What do you think?
I think Mr. Vasiliadis kind of covered the new issues. And so I think we're also going to see a continuation of some of the patterns that we saw in the 19 session. We saw a lot of effort to put collective bargaining agreements in the statute across multiple industries. And I think that is something that we're going to have to contend with going forward. We certainly are going to have to look at probably, paid sick leave and enhancing some of the other topics that we were able to kind of mitigate in the last session. And so I think these are kind of ongoing projects that we've seen from the leadership in the legislature that they intend to keep working on. And so I don't think that we're certainly going to be in a more pro-business legislature going into 21. And I think it's going to be remain to see whether it's, more anti-business in the 19 session.
Yeah. I know that was a big problem in the last session. Billy, I'm sorry, were you just going to say something?
No.
Okay. Paul, get out your crystal ball. I know that the Vegas Chamber was advocating so tirelessly the last session. You rode herd on so many bills and worked with Brian and Billy and so many others. What do you see and what are your hopes for the 21 session?
Sure. I think to add to what Billy and Brian said, that there's a new issues that emerged with the pandemic, but there's also standing issues that we knew that were going to roll over into 2021. And we knew obviously revenue was going to be a conversation. And I think to the point Billy said, if we're managing the pandemic or there's a course for correction, that'd be helpful, but we will have to have a revenue conversation next session. We know that was very clear from closing remarks from legislators on Sunday night that there's that expectation to see where the business community will come forward with or agree upon or be at the table at, however you want to classify it. But we also know there's going to be labor laws, workers' comp is always an issue. There's transparency issues that will come out. I think you'll see also on public records. Police safety, like Billy said, will also be revisited, and collective bargaining too. I think you're going to see a pretty robust agenda coming out that will definitely keep the legislators busy for 120 days. Constitutionally, they can be there for 120 days. So I think you're going to see a pretty busy session coming forward.
Okay. Billy, you are very knowledgeable about politics on the national scene. How do you see national politics playing a role in the Nevada legislature when it comes to the agenda and setting policy?
Well, listen, I think that the so many organizations, after Nevada became kind of a swing state, an early caucus state, and so much national attention, so many organizations are now active in Nevada, whether it's national conservation groups, energy groups, national conservative groups, no tax groups, no spend groups, that we are becoming very much a reflection of the pressures and the issues that are being played out nationally, and will continue to be that. I think you're seeing we're seeing an even widening gap between left and right than we've seen before. So far in national primaries, for example, in House seats, the more conservative candidate has won Republican primaries, the more progressive candidate has won in Democrat primaries. That gap widens, and I think the business community is what sits in that abyss. And we're going to have our work cut out for us. And I think maybe more than ever, a unified business community maybe could become a bridge in that gap that will inevitably be there to start that next session.
Okay. And Brian Wachter, let's talk for a minute just about K through 12 or higher ed funding for that matter for education. You know, the right policies have been the center of debate for several sessions now. You've been there a long time. And certainly K through 12, Clark County School District has been in the media a lot lately and probably will continue to be for a little while longer. What kinds of things do you foresee in the next session, and what do we have to finally do to address some of these education issues in your mind?
Well, one of the big things that we could do is take a look at the decentralization process that occurred over the last several years. It was a great start, and we have seen so far where there are some kind of hurdles or some friction in that process. So I think now is a good time to get a stakeholder group of parents and teachers who have sat on these SOTs and figure out what we need to do. Because what essentially we've done is we've given principals almost complete control over their sites. And that is problematic when we're trying to deal with things like a pandemic, because Superintendent Dara actually can't control what happens to his 366 individuals. And so if that's the case, then we need to figure out some sort of balance of power on those individual sites so that we can still have kind of community-oriented goals going forward. The other thing is we still have a 700 teacher shortage. So that needs to be addressed. And really, we need to look at building some new schools. The only way we can do it, and this pandemic has shown, huge spotlight on the issue of class sizes. And until we start spending money, because we have been spending billions of dollars on education, even new dollars, but until we start spending it on truly lowering class sizes, we're not likely to kind of progress in academic standards.
Okay. Well, and then we talk a lot, Paul, at the Vegas Chamber about advocacy and getting our members involved. And Brian, I know you do that as well. And Billy, you have clients and customers who are incredibly involved at the legislature. What's kind of the biggest advice you would give to, say, the small mom and pops who really don't have anyone necessarily advocating for them, except for organizations like the Vegas Chamber or retail and Nevada Resort Association and so forth? They're the big guys, the gamers. But what about those small individuals who think maybe they don't have a voice? What would you guys say to them?
Sure. I think, it's one of the reasons the Chamber launched this new program, Chamber Advocate Program, so the small members can get involved. And we've made it super easy on the website. If you just go to vegaschamber.com, and you can basically tell us if you want to send emails, do a social media tweet, if you want to make send a letter, or if you want. So we're giving you a bunch of different options to really get involved. But the best thing for them to do is when we're doing webinars or we're sending out alerts, read those emails, because typically all our trade groups will say contact the senator or retweet this. And it takes just a few seconds to do that. And I think the thing we've learned in the last several years, and I think it's something that Billy can definitely elaborate on, is social media is definitely a factor in politics now. Legislators are watching what's happening literally every single second on that. So they're definitely watching the social media feeds, and we want to make sure we're having a presence on there. So if a member can retweet or put a statement out there from their own personal handle, it helps all of us actually in the conversation.
Okay, great. Well, we're out of time for this edition of the show. So I just want to thank you all, Billy, Brian, and Paul, for sharing your expertise today. We thank you so much for your leadership, and thanks for everything you're doing in Carson City and all across the state.
Thank you all.